Welcome to the Caregiver Relief Podcast. I'm your host, Diane Carbo, RN. If you are caring for an aging parent or loved one, you already know how overwhelming it can feel to keep them safe, not just physically, but financially and emotionally as well. Today, we're talking about something that is quietly affecting millions of families: scams targeting older adults. They are not the obvious scams we used to recognize. Today's fraud is sophisticated, emotional, and often deeply personal, designed to create fear, urgency, and confusion in moments when people are most vulnerable. And the truth is, even the most independent, cognitively intact older adults can fall victim. To help us understand what's really happening and what we can do about it, I'm joined by Pascual, CEO of Scamnetic. Al is a recognized expert in cybercrime and a former investigator whose work has led to the arrest of more than 400 fraudsters. In this conversation, we're going to break down how these scams work, why older adults are being targeted, and what you as a caregiver or even a senior can do to protect yourselves before it's too late. This episode is sponsored by myvitalvault.net, your all-in-one life organizer for aging adults and caregivers. It's designed to help you securely store your essential legal, medical, and emergency information in one easy-to-access place. Because when a crisis hits, being prepared can make all the difference. Join our Caregiver Relief community, a warm, welcoming space where you can connect with other caregivers, ask questions, share stories, and find support from people who truly understand. Visit community.caregiverrelief.com to join now. Because caregiving is one of the hardest and most meaningful things you'll ever do, and no one should have to do it alone. And if this episode speaks to you, please take a moment to like, share, or comment. Every click helps us reach more caregivers who need encouragement, resources, and hope. Al, thank you so much for sharing your information about this topic. It's very timely. I recently had a neighbor who lost $500,000. But before we dive into what Scamnetic is, can you start by telling us a little bit about your background and what led you to the world of cybercrime and fraud investigation?
I appreciate the question, and Diane, thanks for having me. So to be clear, I wish my job didn't have to exist.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, I got started doing this because my parents were actually in law enforcement. They were both detectives, which was a fun house to grow up in. But they really wanted me to go to college. I did. I found my way actually to banking, but I realized I was very good at telling when people were lying. And that ultimately led me into fraud investigations. I worked at many banks. I actually used to work for a research firm focused on consumer fraud. So it was a company called Javelin. Started my own technology company focused on consumer cybercrime. And started Scamnetic a few years ago. The reason for starting the company was twofold. One, after my last company, I started to hear a lot about scams. And it's not that they didn't exist, it's that they weren't nearly as prevalent 10 years ago as they are today.
Yeah.
And so something had changed. And I also had a bit of a personal experience talking about people losing money where my father, who I mentioned had been in law enforcement for better than 25 years, just as a police officer or detective, ended up losing hundreds of thousands of dollars to someone over many years. And by the time we found out, it was already too late.
Yeah.
And it felt something needed to be done, that it's something that I could do something about. And here we are.
Al, why are seniors such a prime target for scammers?
I do want to set the record straight. And this actually, I think, maybe speaks to the situation with your neighbor too. Everybody can be scammed.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Everybody can be scammed. So just like my father, I have a professional friend who is in the space for decades. He's been scammed. I've known PhDs who've gotten scammed.
Yeah.
Now, I think the catch with seniors is that they're higher value targets. And that's what makes them so attractive, because as opposed to ripping off someone who's in college and could barely make the rent, seniors have retirement, they have savings. So that makes them very attractive targets. And that's why they're often targeted. And that's why we also often hear stories of significant loss, because they have the money to lose, much more so than an 18-year-old kid.
And we also are seeing social isolation and loneliness. That is really huge. I recently had a friend, a woman, she and her husband, they're not getting along. They sleep in separate bedrooms. And he gave away his life savings to a tennis star that wanted him to come and live with her and build a home together. I'm like, oh, these poor people. Of course, he realized that she wasn't real, and it was probably somebody in another part of the world that was taking his money. So are you seeing an increase in scams that specifically target families or caregivers?
I think the caregivers are in a unique opportunity to be that watchful eye that can get ahead of the scammer, maybe stop it before it gets too far. So the scams themselves don't necessarily target those people, but they play a really important role.
Yeah.
But in as far as the scams affecting seniors and why they're so successful, you did mention, again, the social isolation component for sure. I think there's also something to be said for technology.
Yeah.
The fact of the matter is, everything going digital over the last 20 years has made all of us much more accessible.
Yeah.
But on top of that, it's also made scams incredibly convincing. And even in the last 3 or 4 years, advancements in things like deepfake video technology are just been absolutely tremendous. Not just the quality, but the accessibility. So for criminals, it's very easy to get access to technology that makes them look like and sound like whoever they want, and with very little work on their end. And they take advantage of things like that social isolation and leverage deepfakes to create these convincing personas. And they're not just famous people, the tennis star. I've heard the story of the country singer before, right? We've seen the ones with Brad Pitt and Keanu Reeves. But a lot of the ones I see and hear about are scammers impersonating other seniors.
Yes.
Because there's relatability there, right? They can build bonds around shared interests, and it's a lot easier for them to have that conversation when it feels peer-to-peer to their victim. So they are taking advantage of the tools at their disposal, and they understand their target. And unfortunately, they're getting very good at what they're doing.
What are the most common scams that you're seeing older adults now?
Some of the more common scams, let's see. I have a good story. I don't know if I necessarily put it in a category, but it does speak to how scams have changed. So I think it's something that people need to be aware of. Criminals have much more information at their fingertips than they did before too. So you think about things like a data breach, where these big companies lose all this information. It used to be that criminals would use that information to commit fraud. So they try to be the victim because they have all this sensitive information. Now, that information combined with what they can use AI to find allows them to be super targeted when they go after victims, even just everyday victims. Not like company CEOs, but you and I. And the impersonation scam is one that has gotten incredibly prevalent. Now, impersonation can mean a lot of things. It could be the criminal impersonating your bank. It could be them impersonating someone near and dear to you. I had another story with some seniors where the scammer was impersonating their pastor.
Oh.
And they had reached out, and these two people were very active in the church. They were themselves were both professionals, and the pastor, quote unquote, managed to convince them to go buy gift cards, right, to be handed out to the congregation. And they ended up in a situation where they almost ended up spending $50,000 on gift cards. And ultimately, amazingly, the store stepped in, which we're seeing increasingly too. The stores are becoming aware of this sort of activity, and they're trying to intervene. But impersonation ones are big, right? So the same thing with the banks. When criminals have data, they steal your credit card information. Now, when they have that credit card information, they know where you bank. And so they'll reach out to you and pretend to be bank XYZ. They'll have all the information on your banking relationship, so they can tell you this story that's just so convincing, knowing things that no one could possibly know, and then they get you to move money.
That is what happened to me recently. But because I'm really trying to be aware of these things when doing research and reading about what Scamnetic, I actually said, it's unusual that the bank calls me. I don't feel comfortable giving you. They wanted more information on my account to protect me. So I said, I'll call you back. And of course, I called the bank and it was not who they said they were, but I felt that it wasn't. But I was cognizant enough to say, why is the bank calling me? They text me, they send me emails or whatever, but even emails you can't trust anymore. You have to check. That's one that recently happened to me, and it was from a data breach. I'm sure that happened sometime last year.
100%. I have no doubt.
Yeah.
So the impersonation one's for sure. And then the long con romance scams, they call them pig butchering.
Yes.
And for those who are not familiar, unfortunately, pig butchering is a very unflattering term.
Yeah.
But it comes from the Chinese and it means to fatten the pig before slaughter. And so the idea is these are scams that start very innocently.
Yes.
It's typically an unsolicited outreach, but they're not necessarily asking for anything in the beginning.
Yeah. In the beginning.
It's a mistaken identity. It's just someone looking for a friend. And the idea is to gradually build a relationship, to gradually create these bonds of trust. And this can happen over months, many months.
Yeah.
And even when they go in for the kill, quote unquote, the amount of money they may ask for in the beginning is very small. They may ask for $100, $200, $20, just something to get it started, and it builds over time. And then it can turn into things like investment opportunities, crypto, foreign exchange. And then before you know it, you're out tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars, but you're so deep at that point, and you've done so much over all that time that it just becomes progressively harder and harder to stop. Yeah. And so it's incredibly insidious and dangerous. And that's one that people need to be very aware of.
I watched the Dr. Phil episode, and this little lady gave all of her savings away to a man she was in love with. She's never met, never seen. And she literally, her ego would not allow her to accept that it was a scam. I mean, she still wanted to send him money. And I'm like, oh my. And they actually got the man on the phone. And I thought, here he is saying, yeah, I'm not real. And she's still, and it's really sad that there's some people that feel a need to protect their ego. They can't accept that they've been taken advantage of in any way.
Yeah, and that happens very often. But then unfortunately, when they finally do realize that something's happened, we're also hearing about cases where people try to get help with a scam after they've been victimized, and then they're re-victimized. Yes. Where there are services that supposedly will help you get your money back. Yeah. And I actually heard of a case 2 days ago where someone actually got taken advantage of twice. They were scammed and they went to 2 different services, quote unquote, to get their money back. And they were scammed again 2 more times. So it just speaks to the fact that there are no depths to which scammers will not go.
Yes.
To make money.
So that brings me to, how is technology helping detect or prevent scams, and where are the gaps? I want to talk about what you have done to help us protect ourselves from the evil out there.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate the opportunity, and I want to be clear, there's a lot of opportunity, a lot of things that people can do. So I'm going to talk about maybe more than just what I do too. Sure. But what we do is 2 things. And what we'll work with banks and telecoms and insurers and other companies to give technology to consumers. And the technology will tell you when you're being communicated with by a scammer, whether or not it is a scam. So an email, a text message, something on WhatsApp, a Telegram, we will intercede and tell you exactly what we see and why we think it's a scam. Because what we want to do is we want to get ahead of the scammer before they build the trust. We want to break that spell, make it so that you immediately question their motives, and then you are much less likely to engage with them. And we're able to use our own artificial intelligence and proprietary technology to analyze almost any kind of communication so that we stop you from engaging. But the other thing we can do is we can also tell you who they really are. And so we took technology from a past life of mine where it's the same kind of technology that a bank will use when you want to open a new credit card or an online loan. We built our own process around that kind of technology. But the idea is it makes the person on the other side prove who they are. So before you ever send someone money,
Oh, wow.
you think you're talking to Sarah in Tampa. We're going to tell you, look, it's not Sarah in Tampa. It's Tran in Cambodia. And guess what? We also looked at their face and they were using a deep fake. And so now you're definitely thinking twice before you send them that money. And we're trying to catch things early if we can. If we can't, we can at least give you something, right? Again, break that spell before you make a mistake, even if you don't have access to that kind of technology today. Increasingly, people do. And there's still lots of opportunities for folks to protect themselves, or especially for caregivers to keep an eye on what's happening with their loved ones. One of the things I like to suggest that people do, caregivers do, is take advantage of the ability to add trusted contacts to financial and retirement accounts. So there are some institutions that support this option where, as a caregiver, you can get notified when something happens with their account. For example, there's a high value transaction. So you're a caregiver for your mother. She tries to wire $100,000. You're going to get a notification before the wire is released. And so now it gives you the opportunity to engage with that family member, the person you're caring for, and understand if there's something happening before the incident as opposed to being reactive and then learning about it after the fact. And
I have to tell you, I love that. And I'll tell you why. I just did a podcast with a man who was in banking, literally working in banking. And his mom he was on the East Coast. His mom was on the West Coast. She had a full-time caregiver in the home he paid handsomely for her. And she built them out of $1 million and they didn't know. And so I love the idea of that you have somebody that's going to notify people of these large of notifications of money. She actually falsified checks and everything to get money from this, and the family didn't know. They only found out after the mom died, and they're looking at her accounts that have been depleted.
Yeah, I have, again, going back to my earlier experience, for a lot of people, especially a lot of people who care for others, they are going to find out too late.
Yes.
And then unfortunately, the more that you criticize the new love interest, the new friend, the more inquisitive you are, the more you push, the more that person will pull back.
Absolutely.
And so to be able to come to them with evidence, to be able to come to them in a moment before they make that mistake, that's going to be your best opportunity.
Yeah.
To stop it from happening. Yeah.
I have a neighbor that is 98 years old and his wife is 94. And they've been socially isolated and they wanted a caregiver. They had an outside caregiver come in 4 hours, 3 times a week, and they paid her $30 an hour. That's a really handsome salary. You can't complain about that. We only learned that the caregiver was taking money. She wanted him to pay her car repairs. She wanted him to pay, and he always took her when they went out to eat, to nice restaurants. He bought them meals. He would pay for her husband's meal. She's building a home in Guatemala. He gave her $5,000 to put windows in, then gave her husband $3,000 to get extras for the house. And he's 90 some years old. And the only reason why anybody found out that this was going on is one of my clients calls me up and says his daughter works at the bank and this man goes to his daughter's bank and the daughter says there's this woman and he's taking out $5,000 at a time and we had to stop it. The hard thing is he would not, and this makes me crazy, he would not press charges because he was embarrassed and ashamed that it had happened. And I was livid because this person needs to be stopped. But that's how they keep going over and over again because of people like that. So I really like some of the strategies you're giving people to protect themselves from financial exploitation.
And but in a situation like that, there are other things you can do where you can add yourself to your loved one's bank account. So that way, in the event a situation like that had occurred, then the family member could have pressed charges.
Ah, okay.
And there's other alerts and notifications that are available inside most traditional bank accounts too. So even if they don't enable, or they don't offer what we call trusted contacts, if you're on the account, you can still get those alerts and notifications. So that's an alternative path to take. It's a little bit harder, I think, to navigate in conversation depending on your loved one, but it could give you some more options to stay informed and also take action if things start to get really bad.
It's really sad, but so many seniors are very private about their finances. They don't want their family members to know, and they need to know because of situations just like this where they're exploited and can lose everything in a matter of days, weeks, or months. It doesn't matter. But can you give us some ideas of how to have conversations about scams without causing fear, shame, or resistance?
So you definitely want to get ahead of it. And I think the best way to at least start to have those conversations is to make it more about education, anecdotes, be able to relate stories of similar cases, things you've heard, things you've seen, shows you've watched where these things happened. And that way, at a minimum, hopefully they're on the lookout, but it doesn't become an out of nowhere conversation when you start to get concerned. It gives you a bridge to have the conversation, something to point back to, as opposed to simply an unwelcomed intrusion, right? Which is how it's going to be viewed otherwise.
I have a dear elderly friend. She's no longer with us, but she got a phone call one day saying, "Grandma." And she goes, "Yes, what do you want?" And so, whatever her grandson's name was. So all of a sudden, that person was her grandson, and he was in jail, and he needed her to bail him out.
Yes.
And do you know, she took the information, sent a money order for him. And while she was doing it, she said, "I think I'm going to," she sent it first, which was, she should have waited. But she then called her grandson to see where he was, and he was at work. And so she called. She knew that the money was going to somewhere in California. At least that's where she thought it was going. But she notified the local police, but they said it was already too late and they couldn't get it. And she was saying, "Can't you get a picture of them? Can't you?" When they picked the money up. Oh, she was so mad at herself, but they do things so easily that you just fall into it and it's credible in your mind at the time.
The scammer knows how to set things up so that you're much more inclined to act quickly without thinking. It speaks more to the reflexive part of our brain, right? Rather than the thinking part of our brain, it's also unfortunate because thinking about what kind of advice can I give somebody, there's not a lot of advice that pierces that sort of motion. You're trying to, it's like putting your hand on a hot stove, right? Your instinct, well, even if it's not hot, right? Your instinct is to pull it away. Scammers use that, right? Because we react to a lot of situations that way. So they know exactly what they're doing.
I tell my listeners and my caregivers all the time, decisions made on emotions are poor decisions. They lack any kind of logic. And many caregivers function on an emotional decision basis versus a logical one. And it's hard for people to understand that. But our media has us pulling at our heartstrings every day. And it just makes me crazy. I see the ads with the animals that are abused. I can't even watch those channels anymore. And I have to turn it off because it's pulling at my heartstrings at something that's a concern of mine, but I can't fix the world. And I'm a caregiver professionally and personally, and I always want to take care of people and things, and animals are a love of mine, but I just can't fix the world. And I can't let them pull at my heartstrings for that.
Yeah. And it's not even just about caring for everybody and everything. It's the fact that scammers are going to ingratiate themselves. So another thing I think maybe you can, if you're a caregiver, have a conversation about is being mindful of the places where we build relationships online. Speaking about another scam that we see, these like affinity scams, where maybe you are part of an online group that is interested in travel or crafts, and they'll use that to build that relationship with you, right? They'll be part of the same group, and they'll talk about the places they've been and ask you about where you've been. And so it's not, they find what you care about, right?
Yeah.
It's not all things, it's the things that you care about specifically in the places where you are. And then they use that to build the human connection. They never have to be in the room. They could be a million miles away. But if I'm a caregiver, I'm worried about the new Facebook friend, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And caregivers get scammed too, because, they're desperately needing help and they're trying to reach out and find help, find support. Most of them don't have the financial means to support this fraud or this exploitation, because many of them they quit their jobs to provide care. So it has to be the seniors that they have to go after. So tell me about why you developed a Scamnetic and what you do to help protect us out there from the evil forces.
Yeah, I was in the fraud space for a long time, and fraud and scams are different.
Okay.
So when we talk about fraud, generally what we're talking about is where the criminals tries to be you. They're impersonating you. They want to open an account with your name on it. They want to take over your credit card. With scams, they're trying to manipulate you acting as somebody else. And that's a big difference because all of the controls that exist at banks and other organizations are designed to stop fraud. So they're designed to make sure that Diane is Diane. But what they're not designed to do is to figure out, once we know it's Diane, is she doing what she's supposed to be doing, right? Is she making a transaction that makes sense? And so when we started doing this, that was a paradigm we had to really consider and focus on. And one of the places that we thought we can make the most change was working with institutions and telecoms and others, because they're the backbone of where all this stuff is happening. If we can embed ourselves there, right, offer them a new approach, because the approaches that they built for the last 25 years were not designed for this, then we could be that dam, right, that wall that stops these things from either reaching the customer or leaving their account. But that's a big part of the reason we did it. I've been working in the space for a long time, and there was nothing. Billions invested, regulations left and center, but nothing for scams. But meanwhile, people call their bank when they lose money. 7 out of 10 people who are scammed call their bank, right? The bank can do nothing for them. In the United States, there is no liability shift here. So if you lose your money in the United States to a scam, you are out the money. So the banks had nothing. And so, we're working with them. We're working with the mobile carriers who are getting the messages and the emails to your phones to try to get ahead of it too, because again, they're looking for spam. They weren't looking for scams. Yeah. And so we just saw that gap because no one was prepared for this. No one had invested in it. So it was a clear opening, Diane, for us, and we're making good headway.
I think you said this when we first started talking before we started the show. Can you imagine those people that are scamming us, if they use their knowledge and their information and their abilities for good, how much better the world would be?
One of the things my parents told me when I was younger was that if you want a job for life, work in crime prevention. Crime will never go away. Yeah. There are just going to be people in this world who are going to make money that way, and it will never stop. I'm under no illusion that we can stop it all, but there are things I know we can't.
Yes. Now, if there's one thing every caregiver or senior listening today should do immediately after this episode, what would it be?
So I would contact your bank. I would contact whoever holds your 401k if you have one, and see what controls they can offer you, what ability to include loved ones, caregivers, just on a notification basis. They don't have to have access to your account. They don't have to be able to move money at all, right? But just to have that active as a last line of defense, right? And you may never ever need it. Most people will never need it too, right? So this is not an admission of any kind. It's just think of it as like a parachute.
Yeah.
You definitely want to have it when you need it.
Yes.
Yes. So don't jump out of the plane without it. So that would be one of the first things I would do for sure. And then increasingly solutions like what we do are available too. Look around, ask, see what they have for you, because they are increasingly concerned about the issue. Regulations are going to change soon. So they're going to have more reason to do something about it. But that's where your money is. And they are increasingly inclined to help now. So that would be my first call.
Good point. Thank you so much. Al, I want to tell you how much I appreciate this information because I worry about everybody out there because we're all getting scammed. I know I get lots of emails every day because of what I do. And I send ones that I'm not sure of to my IT guy. And he's always saying to me, why do you open any of these? He yells at me. I don't know because I have a lot of people that I don't know contact me to be on a guest on the podcast. And he just yells at me, don't open anything. Do you know what you're doing? I'm like,
Listen, he's got a good point. Never open an attachment. That
I don't do.
Never open an attachment. You can open an email. Generally, they're going to be relatively safe to the email itself.
Yeah.
But never click the attachment. He's got a point.
Thank you so much. Yes. And I have literally had my credit card hacked 5 times last year. And I've had 5 different credit cards. And it's on Amazon, somehow it was working. And they would buy little things. And I guess as they go higher and higher to keep trying to see what they can get away with. So I try not to use Amazon anymore. And I love it. But I'm afraid to because I don't know I'm tired of getting new credit cards. Do you know how many people I have to change the numbers with every time? That's a pain.
Well, at least you're using credit cards because credit cards give you then another good point. They give you very broad protections that debit cards do not.
Yes.
So you have an unlimited period to make a claim on a credit card because of fraud. With a debit card, you have 90 days. So if you do not detect it within 90 days, you have liability up to $500. So if you're good at managing your money and you're concerned about safety, credit cards are going to keep you safe. So another good one. It's more of a fraud protection, but it even works for scams too, because scammers, they like your card too.
Yeah.
Right? Just like fraudsters do.
Yeah. Al, how do people find you?
They can go to scamnetic.com. I know it's not the easiest thing in the world, but it's scamnetic.com. And they can learn about what we do. We've got some great content on there as well. So a lot to learn, but just appreciate people checking it out.
Thank you. And to my listeners out there, we create a permanent page on the site and we will have Al's information on the site so you'll be able to find him in the future. To my family caregivers out there, you are the most important part of the caregiving equation. Without you, it all falls apart. So please learn to be gentle with yourself. Practice self-care every day because you are worth it.